All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Inside in Tennis podcast. Mitch Michals here, your host as always. And as always, this podcast is available on the Believe Network and available wherever you get your podcasts as we gear up for a little off season. No downtime for this show, but a good opportunity to talk with different people in and around the game. And joining us now on the show, first time, I'm very excited to have this person on the show. He has a couple jobs. He's in a couple different industries, right? Attorney, lobbyist, but also in the tennis space, CEO and founder of the Cracked Media Ventures. Everybody knows Cracked Racquets and all the outstanding content on site, the source of junior college and pro tennis. And they've got a lot of podcasts as well that we're going to get into. I'm excited to talk to this person. It's Dalton Thieneman, also a fellow Billiken on the show too. So Dalton, welcome to the program.
Yeah, Mitch, thanks so much for having me on. Pumped to be here. Obviously, yeah, us Bills got to stick together. I know we were catching up yesterday a little bit about the basketball team and shirts. Not quite bringing us back to Majerus level in 11-12, but the buzz is back. And then, yeah, obviously a lot to cover. Midwest guys and tennis guys. So, yeah, pumped to be on, brother.
Yeah, it's got to be exciting too, and we'll cover a lot here, but we're at a point where it's been a couple years since you started this idea, and you've gotten to this point where people know who you are, you have a reputation, you have partnerships and popularity, but sitting back, and I know you've got a lot going on and you're working on the next thing and what's going on, but do you ever take a minute and be like, all right, this is pretty cool. We've got a couple years under our belt and we built something here.
Yeah. Well, so it's, my two business partners, Alex Gruskin, who's the face of Cracked Racquets and does all the content, front facing for us. And then, Daniel Westoff, who's another fellow Billiken, who I, went to high school with, played tennis with, at St. X in Louisville. And then he went on to be an aerospace engineer by trade. So, the three of us, things are so busy, so we don't get a lot of time to sit back and reflect on, how did we get here? And like, this is so exciting, like, celebrating our success. But, it is kind of a pinch me moment every day because we've had a lot of, competitors in the early days that, fizzled out, the first, couple years of us, starting the business. And then, working in sports in general, but in tennis, we're all huge tennis heads. It's an absolute blast. So yeah, we're lucky to get to this point for sure.
Yeah, it's got to be interesting too. And you mentioned that like three-headed monster at the top. I know Gruskin a little bit. The guy just doesn't stop working. His brain knows one speed, and it's tennis. It's got to be a nice luxury to have. But you also mentioned Daniel Westoff and the aerospace side, which I didn't even know. So you have three people. You have a tennis extensive background in Gruskin. Everybody has a little bit of a background. You have an aerospace engineer, and you have the business law side. It seems like that combination has set Cracked Racquets up very well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the most intriguing part of this, right, is that for all three of us, none of us went to school for broadcast journalism or media in any capacity. We didn't work in media, in traditional legacy media before starting Cracked Racquets. But I think to your point, Gruskin was working for a congresswoman in Michigan before he came on with us full time. Daniel with the aerospace engineering background, and then me and law and business. I think we've all got our lanes. We're tennis fanatics and we're tennis fans first, but those backgrounds and those experiences have really set us up for success because it's without Gruskin, this thing doesn't go, obviously, because he's a encyclopedia of tennis knowledge. He's got a photographic memory that doesn't hurt, and he has an unreal motor and is following all things tennis. But then without Westoff, actually, putting the editing and the video side for the podcast, but then also developing our software on the broadcast side, it can't work without him either. So all three of us bring unique things to the table.
What was your tennis consumption like? I mean, you mentioned growing up in Louisville, playing high school and playing growing up your whole life, but what was tennis like in your life growing up? Was there, other sports involved? Were you watching it nonstop, or did you kind of discover this passion and have it build over time?
Yeah, and it's a great question because I'm a late adopter. Alex and Daniel both were kind of lifelong tennis fans and tennis players. And I'm the oldest of four boys, so we were playing every sport in the book in the backyard growing up. And tennis actually wasn't the primary sport for me until high school. So I was a basketball, baseball, football guy until I got cut from the basketball team my freshman year at St. X, and it forced me. My parents were like, "Hey, you're not going to be sitting on the couch. I know you're going to get in trouble." So they were like,
Yeah.
"Hey, you need to do something here." And my mom, is a big tennis player and been a tennis fan, most of her life. So I had that influence. So like we grew up going to the Western Southern in Cincinnati. I was a fan of Andy Roddick and the backwards hats and the Lacoste fits in the early 2000s. So getting into my freshman
Hmm.
year, and I was the last person to make the team as a freshman because I didn't have private
Hmm.
lessons and the whole background that a lot of my teammates
Yeah.
did. But I got eat up with it after that. I started playing 6, 7 days a week, made
Mm.
varsity as a sophomore, and then was all state my junior and senior year. And we won 3 state titles while I was
Mm.
there, and I was captain of the team as a senior. So I was a late adopter, but I
Mm.
think that also is, helps me bring a unique experience into this media fold too, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
not like your typical tennis fan who has been around the sport as long as everybody else. I was a sports fan first before getting into
Yeah.
tennis.
Yeah, it's
So
also true. It's also true in terms of you look at the people that play other sports, like whether you're talking high quality athletes that, Ben Shelton is the example, right? He played football before tennis, so it's like he has other skill sets that he's bringing into this. I think it's true, and I think it's also a part, Dalton, where you're able to work on tennis and build to something. You were a late adopter that, got a lot better as you put the work in. But of all the sports we've come across, and there's a lot of great ones out there, there's just something about tennis that speaks to people like you and myself too, where you're able to work on certain aspects of your game. And, I was talking to someone who's in the senior citizen demographic. They're still working on their game, trying to get better and improve certain things as well, which makes tennis unique, I would say.
for sure. And you hear it all the time. And I even heard this, growing up before I went all in the deep end on tennis for my parents. Like, tennis is a lifelong sport. This is something that you can play when you're my age and later. And it's true. Like,
Hmm.
I picked up that passion for tennis at 14 and was eat up with it for 4 years in high school. Was gonna play D3 tennis, decided not to, and then went to SLU, as you know, and didn't play, and got into Greek life and everything there. But I've picked up tennis again, in my 20s and 30s, and I'm playing twice a week. And to your point, it truly is a lifelong sport that you can see progress. Like if you put the time in,
Yeah.
you can improve on your serve, you can improve, in your volleys at the net.
Yeah.
If one of your wings is weaker, like my
Yeah.
backhand, like I can actually work on that and get better
Yeah.
throughout, you know, 20, 30, 40 years of a career in the
Yeah.
sport, which you can't say for other sports, man. You can't play pickup basketball in your 30s anymore, dude. I've tried, and you
No.
get hurt, man, an
Yeah.
Achilles or
Yeah.
an ACL tear, man. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you're not really improving areas of your game in your 30s and 40s in basketball. But you graduate from SLU and then Indiana law, and you start this other career. How does tennis factor into your professional life? I'm curious how, even before, maybe it was right at the moment, but before cracked rackets and cracked media became a thing, how did tennis start to creep back into your professional life?
Yeah, so it was really so after SLU, I was going to go to law school right away. I had gotten into UNC and Vandy, but I decided to take a gap year out of SLU, and then ended up working at the State House as a legislative staffer, and then going to night school at IU. And as a in the political world, I saw legislators networking at events after hours. And honestly, golf is one of those sports that's big for fundraisers in the political
Mhm.
space. But I had a lot of legislators that also played tennis, and that's how I got back into it in 2013, and then it ultimately joined a 4 or 5 old man's USTA league here in Indianapolis, and I'm actually still on that team. Mark Brandeman's my captain. I'm like still doing that.
Okay.
But it was a way to get a workout in, but then
Hmm.
also to network and kind of build up my network here in Indianapolis because I wasn't from the area and didn't know many people.
Hmm.
And how cool is that to, play a sport that, I have a passion for, but also get a workout in and then be networking with people too. So that's kind of what reconnected me with the sport post grad in my 20s.
Yeah, it really does speak to tennis as a community and how you're able to just find, purpose and not just playing the game, but the people around it. And really says a lot to what this game can offer. Were you somebody too, and you mentioned being a sports fan, and it kind of goes into the what they call the entrepreneur spirit, but were you always someone that was curious and maybe when it comes to or sports broadcasting in general, watching with an eye of how can this be better, which eventually we get to Cracked Rackets and how you guys provide coverage, but were you looking at broadcast thinking, how can this be improved?
Yeah, and I've told this story a lot. So if you've heard this before, feel free to skip forward a little bit. But
Yeah.
it is important in kind of the genesis of Cracked Rackets and how we got to this point. But it was summer of 2017. I was playing in that old man's USTA
Mhm.
4-5 summer league, and at the time, we're after the match, grabbing a beer after the match and talking about Taylor Fritz, Francis Tiafo, Tommy Paul, Coco Gauff. All of them are in teenagers, late stage
Mhm.
teenagers at that point, and not only were competing for junior slams, but they were winning them. And a couple of buddies on my team were like trying to look up stats and results from like the French Open and Wimbledon and find out more about these players who we think have the chance to bring U.S. tennis back to the golden days of
Yeah.
Agassi and Sampras and Michael Chang in the 90s. And then Venus and Serena and into the Roddick era. And we couldn't find much
Wow.
information. So not only like results for the junior slams, but other sports, LeBron James, even like a Zion Williamson growing up, eighth grade, ninth grade, you're seeing House of Highlights.
Yeah.
You're seeing what shoes they're wearing, what playlists they're listening to. And then
Yeah.
meanwhile in tennis, we have a huge storytelling issue here. So
Right.
that is why we ultimately started Cracked Rackets in, I think it was August of 2017 and started the
Hmm.
three podcasts.
Hmm.
And Daniel Westoff at the time, was working the aerospace engineer job. I was 25 years old, still working at the State House and then wrapping up my law degree at night. And then Gruskin came
Hmm.
into the fold later. He was, I think, still a junior at Michigan
Yeah.
and was recording podcasts out of his dorm room there. It was like, who would score the highest on their ACT out of the big three? Who would win the 40-yard dash between Andy Murray and Rafael Nadal? And I'm like, this
Yeah.
guy is thinking outside the box. And this is the type of content, by the way, that tennis still today needs more of. But
Right.
I knew right then, like listening to some of the podcasts, I was like, this kid's a wonderkind. Like he's a
Hmm.
101. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, discovering him that way. I didn't know that part of the story. That's pretty interesting. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you could find and these prodigies and good players coming up a lot easier in other sports, and tennis had that gap that you were able to fill. So it started with the podcast, with Mini Break, with Great Shot and Cracked Interviews. But what were like the early stages of Cracked Rackets like? I got to imagine anything, even something as fun as tennis, there's growing pains. What were those early stages like for you guys?
Yeah, well, so and just from a timeline perspective, so August of 2017, we start the podcast, and at the time, I'm hosting our podcast, and I think it was just Cracked Interviews at the time. So we
Hmm.
were having William Blumberg and Chris Eubanks and
Hmm.
Robert Cash and some of the like young juniors on the podcast, and then simultaneously we were having we had a blog that was a little edgier than we should have been, and I had some mentors in the space that were like, hey, I know you're trying to create like a bar stool for tennis here, but just remember it still is tennis. Like this still is kind of a country club sport. It is a little buttoned up. So if you're going to
Yeah.
move the needle and look at this as like a long term, business here, you're going to burn more bridges than you want to if you do it that way. So we kind of
Hmm.
scaled back a little bit, from the edginess, but Gruskin then DM'd us a few months later, and that's when he sent over the podcast of the 40-yard dash for the big three and the ACT scores and all that. And I remember I was in a wills, trust, and estates class in my law school, like night class, and he had been DMing us for a couple weeks, I think. And finally, we scheduled a time, and we had a 15-minute break in between And I go out thinking that this is going to be a 5 to 10 minute call. Ended up being an hour and a half. And I miss, my wills, trust, and estates class, which I think, long term here, it's for the
It's
better
probably good,
because
yeah.
Gruskin ultimately convinced me on that call not only to join us and end up co-founding Cracked Rackets with Daniel Westhoff and I, but for me to hand the keys of the content and all of the podcasts over to him. And most
Heck of
people
a
in my
salesman. It's a heck of
yeah,
a
yeah, and
salesman.
it says it all. Nobody,
Uh,
now knowing Gruskin would be surprised by that, but a lot of people in my position may have been offended, like, "Hey, man, like, what you think you can do this better than me?" I'm glad that he did, and I knew right away that, like, I had no business, running that side of the business. So yeah, handed that over to him, and then fast forward 2018, we basically you talk about challenges and kind of growing pains in the business. I knew that if one of us didn't go full time, we were never going to really
right,
grow at the level
right.
that we needed to. So basically, convinced Daniel Westhoff to quit his aerospace engineering job in St. Louis, and he was designing private jets at the time. So like it was a pretty big sales pitch, but he took a leap of faith, quit his job. We didn't have enough revenue to even cover, his salary yet. But he came full time in 2018,
Yep.
and then, and this is kind of the evolution of getting into the broadcasting side of the business. We went to the indoor national championships for college tennis up in
Right.
Chicago in 2019, and at that time, our podcast had kind of taken off a little bit. The relationship
Right.
with the Tennis Channel and the Tennis Channel Podcast Network had started. So we
Right.
started getting some, traction and momentum both with the podcast audience, but then on social media. So we go to indoors in Chicago, and we're the
Mm-hmm.
only media there. There aren't really any fans other than parents. Like we're getting access to JJ Wolf, the number one
Yeah.
player in college tennis, number one, women's player, the best coaches. And I
Yeah.
remember, leaving indoors and calling my dad, who is a business owner, and I go to him for a lot of advice, and I'm like, hey, like, I'm really excited about the fact that we had this level of access, but he's like, you're either gonna, go bankrupt in 6 months or you've struck gold here. So you fast forward another year and we're broadcasting indoors. And
Yeah.
then from there, locked in partnerships with the ACC, SEC, Big 10, Big 12. And
Mm-hmm.
now we're doing, 500 plus matches a year or events a year on ESPN Plus.
Wow, incredible, incredible stuff there. We got more with Dalton Thieneman here on the Inside in Tennis podcast, talking to the founder of Cracked Media Ventures, Cracked Rackets, his head person here on the show. A lot that you just said there was interesting, especially the part two. And I think that's the lesson, right? That you saw yourself as selfless in a role, right? Like Gruskin could do this job a little better. I'm better off here. I think people, especially business owners and people that found stuff, right? They might not take that big picture approach, but you saw it'd be better if I passed the baton. So I thought that was very interesting. As is, I got to go back to the edgy part of things. I think this is the thing with tennis that I wrestle with too, because I understand it and I understand that it's a different sport. It's got great opportunities and it's different in a certain way, but there's some gatekeeping that does go on, unfortunately. And I think that you can speak to it more than I can. I'd like to see a little more flexibility. I think we're starting to get that because, as you know, in the last 5, 6 years, since the pandemic, really, the tennis popularity, there's been a boom with people playing it, watching it, consuming it. So I wrestle myself, and I was wondering what you think of this kind of yin and yang of those two schools of thought.
And it's something that we had like no understanding about and really no sensitivity towards when we first started this thing, right? So like we came in, Westhoff and I in our mid 20s, Gruskin in his early 20s, and we're like a bull in a china shop. It's like this
Yeah.
is the type of content that our we want and our buddies want. But yeah, to your point, the tennis powers that be have a stranglehold over the sport. I mean, it's super different than the team sports out there because
Yeah.
and it's a global sport. It's like the number two
Right.
sport in the world, right? So
And you
you've
said
got
powers, which is like, that's another point to highlight. There's multiple powers as opposed to other sports, and that's tough for everyone to navigate.
yeah, it's not like you have a commissioner over the whole sport like the NBA or the MLB
Hmm.
does, right? So like you've got all four of the Grand Slams, you've got federations in each country, you've got a governing body of tennis here in the U.S. You've got the collegiate level, the junior level, et cetera. So it's a lot more convoluted than most people outside of the sport really realize. And we had to, because I still see us as disruptors, like we're trying to do things our way and do it differently. But for you to really make an impact and make a difference, you can't just be posting on social media feedback or, criticism and ripping on the tennis powers that be if you actually want to get something done. And
Hmm.
that's something that we had to learn pretty quickly. Especially within college tennis, which we kind of have, a monopoly over from a media perspective now, because we came in and we had a lot of strong opinions about the way that we thought college tennis needed to be covered and how beautiful of a sport that is in the wider sport of tennis. I think that where
Hmm.
especially with Alex and I with the political side, I think that's where having that background and kind of the
Right.
deal making prowess and like that kind of finding a compromise helped us because we were able to work with some of those leaders within the sport behind the scenes as
Yeah.
opposed to criticizing them online, which happens a lot nowadays. So
It certainly does. And, the idea that there's diversification in your approach, like three different podcasts, and we mentioned them where you're giving everybody a different spin and it's different types of programming. It leads to what you said, right? College tennis, you are a staple of it at this point. And with that CrossCourt Cast, which I wanted to get into, right? Like you've developed a way with some software leveraging AI, but with, Westhoff developing software, Gruskin working like all hours of the day, but you've developed a way with this CrossCourt Cast to broadcast tennis, college tennis in a different way because for people listening that are just fans of the program, it's an entirely different beast, right? 6 matches at a time, tough to keep tabs on everything. How did you, I guess, attack this problem, this good problem? Like, how can we get as much tennis out to the masses? And how did you come with the way of, okay, we're going to do it this way, the CrossCourt Cast that has been a huge hit?
yeah, so the cross-court cast is essentially like an NFL red zone type format. And honestly, for fans of college tennis who for years have had to consume the sport with a grainy stream and have 20 different tabs up on their computer, this was really the only pathway forward to effectively like cover the sport, but also allow fans to follow it. So having a guy like Westhoff who's able to program, we use OBS software, but he's also, coded all the software on top of that allows us to do switches to cover 32 sites, simultaneously if we want to. It was really the only pathway forward because, in indoors in 2019 and then covering some of the conferences the couple years after that, only covering a quarter two just wasn't a proper way to fully cover even an individual match because to your point, there's 6 singles matches going on, and then if you want to cover several schools or sites at once like we do for the SEC and ACC now, we had to move to that model where it is like a double or triple box option, like Red Zone does, and I think just if we take a step back for how sports fans in general are consuming sports now. Like, how often, Mitch, do you, even if you're like watching a Billiken game, are you just sitting there watching the game for 2 hours straight without looking at your phone or another tablet during the course of the 2 hours? Like, it doesn't happen,
Yeah,
right?
it's true. It's true. Now, and I was thinking about this too in the coverage and the way it's done because you never know, like in college tennis, especially, you don't know what the drama's going to be. You have to be prepared for this match can go quick or maybe an outer court match that is like we talk about it all the time. I think your influence on other sports on how tennis is broadcast has been seen. And I think it bodes well to just what we were saying beforehand, right? Like showcasing the junior and college players that don't get the shine because that was the lane that I think you guys have filled so well. The fact that there are a lot of good players in college and junior tennis that nobody knows about. And this cross court cast is the first of maybe many times people get to watch these great players.
Yeah, for sure. And that it goes back to like, why we started this thing to begin with in 2017. I think, other sports do a really good job of telling the stories of, the players and people in their sports from an early age.
Yeah.
And tennis, we have Billie Jean King, the girls 16s and 18s nationals out in San Diego. We have Kalamazoo up in Michigan for the boys, 16s, 18s every year. But a lot of those stories aren't told until they become the Alcarazes and centers of our sport, right? So I
Hmm.
think for tennis to take off and kind of build out like the other sports have done, you have
Yeah.
to build a pipeline for fans to start following the characters of people in our sport at an early age.
Yeah.
So CrossCourt Cast, certainly allows us to do that, and we've really done a good job in the college space, kind of rolling out that product. But our big plans for 2026 is to do more in the junior space. Like we've covered
Yeah.
Billie Jean King and the girls nationals out there the last few years, but we want to cover more junior events, in 2026 and beyond. And we're working with USTA on a strategic partnership to do that.
Yeah, and I got to imagine in terms of feedback, like the parents must just love you guys. Like it's just out of control support from
Yeah,
people, parents, and people that are connected with the players. Because starting there, and you can get the player perspective, but this is just gold for them to get to watch their kids and their spouses or whoever it is.
for sure. Well, and honestly, that's like the broadcasting side of the business. I talked about indoors in 2019, but I'm the
Yeah,
oldest of four boys, and my youngest
yeah,
brother is kind of the tennis prodigy of the family. So he was top 10 in the country out of high
nice.
school, and as the oldest brother, I was helping him with the recruitment process with my parents, and we found out through that process back in 2018, 2019 that even the top 15, 20 schools in the country only had a grainy stream that you could follow. No commentary, no live scoring. So that was kind of an aha moment. How are, and tennis parents, like they have a reputation for a reason. They're super engaged in every
Yep.
aspect of their kids' lives. So that doesn't stop, once they go on to college. Like if you're
Hmm.
not able to physically be there, as a family member for your kid playing a
Hmm.
D1 tennis match or D2, D3, whatever, there should
Yeah.
be, a solid stream, especially now that it's, 2025, 2026. We have all this technology
Yeah.
right there. So parents, yeah, they are definitely make up a huge part of our community, and we love, providing some coverage for the parents and the families out there for sure.
Yeah, if you don't mind me asking, and again, that's awesome about your brother, but what was the age when it finally happened where he just passed you?
Oh man. Yeah. So, and seriously, so I'm
Yeah.
oldest, and then there are
Hmm.
three,
Yeah.
younger brothers, and we played, ping pong growing up. We played tennis growing up, and he was fighting just to be on the court with us. But I think it was probably, no kidding, like 12s, 13, like when he was, when he played the 12s clay court, nationals. I
Yeah.
remember I lost a tiebreaker with him. I was down there like warming him up, and I lost a tiebreaker for the first time, and I haven't beat him since. And
Yeah.
that's like not an exaggeration. Yeah. So
Yeah.
he went on to play number one at Northwestern
Nice.
and was all Big Ten. So I like
Yeah.
to, and Parker, the second in line, says the same thing. Like we built that chip on his shoulder. So you're
Yeah.
welcome. Yeah.
That younger brother theory just riding through. I
Exactly.
also do think in terms of the players, right? Like in the Cracked Interview show where Gruskin gets a chance to speak with coaches or players. But I've said this before, like Cracked Interviews is a good opportunity to hear players for the first time, see what they're like, just whether they're not just media trained, but what kind of opinions and how they're able to gel before they get. I mean, you mentioned Chris Eubanks is a big name, JJ Wolf, names that we know, but it's a good opportunity to just hear from the players for the first time.
Yeah, well, and even still today, but in the early days, we were reaching out to top five players in the collegiate ranks, and no kidding, we would like for most of them be the first or second interview that they've ever had,
Yeah.
outside of like a local station after the state finals kind of thing. So it's a great way to and just like I said, like with LeBron James and some of these people that come up and that are like the best and the goat in their
Mhm.
sport, how
Mhm.
cool to see them at 18, 19, 20 years old. And that's what Cracked Interviews does. So Gruskin does a great job interviewing and kind of, peeling back behind the curtain, and not just like covering results. Cause I think that's another thing that a lot of, media within tennis, they're just covering the results on court, and he likes to like showcase some of that personality too.
Yeah, no, it's very, very unique and in a very positive way. And also knowing this too, Dalton, like you guys have expanded into pickleball. I've been following a little bit of that. What was that decision like, and how do you navigate those tricky waters, I'll say?
Yeah, it's super controversial, and I know, any like the aggregators out there are probably gonna like see a clip or listen to this, and this is gonna be the thing they're like, oh, whatever, I can't believe it. And it is funny, and I was so against pickleball the first 2 to 3 years, whenever it blew up in 2020. But now I'm playing it, even myself, and it's here to stay. And in my opinion, I think tennis needs to come and bring these other racket sports into the fold as much as possible, right? Because I think it's a good pathway into tennis. Like people that are playing pickleball, and even padel, some of these people will never pick up a tennis racket unless it's, very intentionally programmed. So yeah, we built out Crack Paddles, a different brand. We've got a podcast, the Crack Paddles podcast, with Alex Crum and Kevin Dong, two pro players. And then yeah, we're broadcasting pickleball too. So we've done a lot with D.A.R.E, which is basically the UTR of pickleball. So we're covering some collegiate pickleball. So there's a reoccurring theme here with us. And then we've done some stuff with National Pickleball League as well. So, I just think it was an easy transition for us from, the software, racket sport, like pretty seamless. But we're also planning to get into all Olympic sports down the road. We've done some volleyball too.
Oh, wow. So that's a big thing, that last part, right? Getting into the Olympic sports and away from the racket sports. Was that just, it seems like a natural, right? But you have these, again, I think the common theme, right, is it's underutilized, undershown, these story. Like we don't know enough about them in non-Olympic years. Was that kind of the thought process, that there's just a lot of great players that people only know about or hear about every 4 years?
Yeah, it was kind of a perfect storm of we the last 2 years have covered IU Indy volleyball, the women's team here in Indy. A good buddy of mine, Luke Basso, took over as their athletic director, and they were only able to cover, I think it was half of their home matches. And so we came in and offered a pretty affordable broadcasting solution, and we're able to cover all of their home matches that way. But I think it's just, a reoccurring theme here with a niche sport, especially in collegiate athletics now. Like these non-revenue generating sports, mostly Olympic sports, are going to have a tough time here moving forward than in this new house settlement NIL world. So if we can help, showcase the players and the stories in those sports, we've got the playbook to do so. So.
Yeah, I don't know if you were around. I was sitting there when Penn State came in to SLU to play way back in the day when they were #1 undefeated, and I could not believe their volleyball team, just how athletic and insane they were. So there's real potential, especially in the Big Ten Conference, to showcase what you guys are doing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it is crazy how like volleyball and gymnastics have taken off and are getting, to the point that they're like on ESPN and getting
wasn't
platforms
Nebraska
like
had
that.
like 90,000 people last year at a game? I mean,
It's unreal. And it's hilarious though. Westhoff too, like doesn't have much experience with volleyball, but with us covering it, he's now watching it just as a fan. Like it's an entertaining, sport to watch, and it's super fast paced, and it's cool to see how much it's taken off.
We got a couple more things with Dalton Thieneman here, the CEO and founder of Cracked Media Ventures, discussing just his business acumen, and a lot of different things about Cracked Racquets that we're delighted to showcase here on the show. And Dalton, it's been just this great run for you the last 7-8 years, still balancing, the two hats. Is that kind of where you see yourself going forward in the future? Day job, in the legal and political realm, and then keeping it going with what you have in the media and expanding now, but also outside of the racket sports?
Well, so I'm a new dad, and I know that's not the answer that you're looking for, but my wife and I have an 8-month-old daughter, our first. And so time is a lot more precious these days than it
Yeah.
was, before that. So I think ultimately, the dream is to go full time and join Alex and Daniel. We have a couple exciting announcements that I can't share too much about right now
Hmm.
for early 2026. We're going to bring on another full time team member who's been a long time part of the team already on a part time
Okay.
basis. But yeah, ultimately I do. I'd still love, the lobbying gig. There are things I don't like about it too, because
Yeah.
politics is pretty crazy right now. But I'm in a unique position to do both right now. So
Mhm.
just, taking it day by day.
Yeah, I've learned not to ask about what's in store next year because, I mean, you've done well, like you teased it well, but there's been a bunch of people that said, I can't tell you whether it's a reporter or a business person. They're just, and I get it. It's cool. It leaves a lot of intrigue for everyone out there listening.
Yeah, I'll just say it's not going to shock anyone,
Okay.
this team member that's
All
joining full
right.
time in January. And it's going to allow us to, probably scale the amount of coverage that we have the capacity for in college
Right.
tennis by like 25-30%. So
Awesome.
I'm really excited about it. And yeah, yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to share more until we actually put it out, but early January, you'll see more on that.
Well, it has to be very rewarding and cool. Like we started the show, just thinking back, right, from being a tennis fan to playing it to working your way into the industry to partnering with the ITA and partnering with ESPN, right? You were alongside, you're a contemporary with these big names, the biggest brand name in sports and the governing body of college tennis. It has to be very rewarding that they view you as an equal.
Yeah, yeah. It's I don't know if they maybe they view us as an equal, but we're not. But we're just honored to be a part of the ecosystem and to be shining a light on, the sports of tennis that deserve the light, and the players and stories that we're able to share. And yeah, it's like I started off with, it's a pinch me moment every day that we're working in tennis. I would have never dreamed that this actually became a reality in high school whenever I got the tennis bug.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited for the future and what we're going to do. Like I said, our like initial kind of focus
Yeah.
for next year is cover more in the junior space. Um, but yeah, we're partners like ESPN and kind of scaling, coverage on ESPN Plus has been insane. They've been a great partner, even at NCAAs down in Orlando a few weeks ago. The support that they provided to allow us to do, 15-hour days for 4 days there for individuals was insane.
Yeah.
And then the ITA, the governing body of college tennis, Dave Mullins is the new CEO. I guess it's been a year.
Yeah.
But Tim Russell was the longtime CEO there and did a great job. But Dave has been a great partner, and it's been awesome working with him early in his tenure there. So yeah, there's a lot on the
Yeah.
horizon, and I know it's kind of a new day in tennis too, with the big three out of the picture. Djokovic is hanging on and still competitive, and then the Serena news here this week, which is hilarious. We still need to get more
Uh-huh.
information on why she, entered all that, but I yeah, I'm excited,
Mhm.
and our team is excited for what's to come.
Yeah, getting the opportunity to showcase these future potential good players, great players, and maybe stars coming through, and you might see them first on Crack Rackets. Well, I did want to leave with this, Dalton. It's been a blast, but it is pretty cool in reading up in your backstory, and it ties it all together. But working on the board with D.A.R.E and helping young kids as well, giving kids an opportunity and some guidance that, this all is connected, right? These kids could end up becoming tennis players, and who knows? But I think it's good to really give back and help the youth. And, you never know what paying it forward could do. So props again to that.
Yeah, thanks. And I actually just rolled off. I was president for, I think it was for 4 years of D.A.R.E Indiana here in Indiana, for the board of directors. And I think I was on the board for a total of 8 years. But yeah, it was an organization that I was lucky enough to be a part of in Southern Indiana down in New Albany, and Officer Friendly had a huge impact on my life. I think it was probably like sixth or seventh grade that I went through the program. And whenever I started on the board 7-8 years ago, they had federal funding dollars that were kind of like lifting the program up entirely, and that grant went to the wayside. So it's a super important organization. I think, getting involved in your community and in nonprofits like that, whatever you're passionate about, is a big deal. And more people need to get involved in organizations like D.A.R.E for sure. So
That's very well said, Dalton Thieneman. We appreciate you coming on the show. Best of luck with everything that Cracked Media Ventures does. There'll be tons of great content coming down the pipe for Cracked Racquets. Can't wait to consume it. It was a pleasure, man. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
yeah, thanks, Mitch. Roll Bills, baby. Let's go.
Let's do it. Let's roll Bills. That was Dalton Thieneman. This is the Inside in Tennis podcast. We are available on all your podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon Music, wherever you get your shows. Just search Inside in Tennis podcast. The show pops right up. Subscribe so you get every episode automatically downloaded to your listening device, and follow along on the YouTube channel at Mitch Michals for full video episodes with Dalton and our outstanding catalog of guests. We're back in a few days as the tennis off season rolls along. So for Dalton Thieneman, I'm your host, Mitch Michals. This was the Inside in Tennis podcast. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.